Welcome to the Nice Hair Podcast. I'm Hannah.
And I'm Haley.
We are two girls committed to being nice,
To hair and business.
and to keeping it real.
And we're rolling. And pretend I didn't do that. Action.
Welcome to episode, this is 26.
Oh, you guys, I messed my nail up.
We have Amber Fortunato, who's not only a Enneagram specialist, that's what I'm going to call you. She's also the lucky recipient of the best last name ever. Fortunato.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I love it.
Okay, so Amber works with Haley at her salon, but you also tell us your official title as far as Enneagram.
Okay, I just am like a certified Enneagram coach.
And tell us what that means and what the Enneagram is.
Okay, so the Enneagram is a 9-type personality system. It's loosely based on your defense mechanism you developed through your childhood. Some people think you were like born with it, but generally you develop it over your early childhood.
So it's developed over early childhood in response to how you deal with the world and like defend
your worldview.
Okay.
It's basically your worldview and how you cope.
Okay.
So that's why it's not really important your behavior, more important your motivation for your behavior.
Interesting.
I started studying it when I was like 19, 20 years ago, and then read about it for years. It recently totally exploded and became crazy trendy and popular. And a couple years ago, some coaching options came available and I decided to do it. So I did like a course to get certified to do coaching and help people identify their type and sort of grow from there, because it's a journey. You can't just like take a test and like be done. It's definitely a journey to figure out who you are. And
I think a lot of people think that it is just a test that you take and that test determines what your number is.
Yeah. And then done.
Yeah.
And really, if you think that if all you have time for is like a quick test, then the Enneagram's not for you, because it's like so much of a lifelong journey of understanding yourself and other people and like growing. And
This is so interesting. And so how I always looked at it, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that maybe if you could get to know yourself through the Enneagram, it could help you in relationships with other people depending on their Enneagram, or is it specifically like a self-growth
No,
tool?
absolutely a relationship tool.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think like we were talking about, whatever's going on in your head, it's so easy to think that's the way everyone else is viewing things. And they may react a certain way because they're interpreting it differently, or their needs are different, or their childhood wound is coming through. And so once you understand yourself, I think then you can sort of branch out and start knowing other people and their responses to you.
Right. Much like I think other therapies, or
Very much.
how like a counselor or a psychologist would use like the Myers-Briggs test to identify how you deal with the world. But yeah, it's super interesting. I didn't know much about it. Honestly, I feel like Haley and I really started talking about it because I would see it on like, social stuff or whatever. And then you think, like everybody and what their number is. I was like,
for sure.
I'm an 8. My husband's a 1. Like you start knowing all this stuff.
Yeah.
But so tell us, if you were curious about identifying yourself or getting to know yourself through this, like what would be the best way to start? And like, is it good to use someone like you as a tool?
Yeah. So I think if you really, really want to delve into it, having some sessions with a coach is awesome to help identify. I mean, there are some really great books out there that are really, really simple. The Road Back to You is like a really good starter book.
The Road Back to You.
And my favorite is called The Enneagram Made Easy. That was like my first ever book. And
That's the one you got me, right?
Yes.
Yes. I love that book.
The Enneagram Made Easy.
Yeah.
It's really, it makes it super simple. It like
so
breaks,
easy.
breaks everything down in not an overwhelming way. Cause I think maybe if you're just getting into it, you could maybe be a little bit overwhelmed by it.
I mean,
for
it's
sure.
Like even cartoony and
it's like fun.
Yeah. No, I think it's easy to get overwhelmed because especially if you just Google it or get on Instagram or Facebook or whatever and look for like, what Enneagram type am I? Like at first I was like, well, I'm a party animal clearly. So I'm a 7. And then like, I really took a couple more tests and I was like, ooh, I'm a dick. I'm an 8. And then you just don't really know, you know, and then there's like wings and you're just so confused.
There's like all these social medias of like, this is how each number responds to this. And so it feels like you can just pick which one you'd respond like, and that must be what I am. But that's not going to tell you anything.
Right.
So I think books are a really great way to start. Or if like you really are stumped and you've looked through some basic books and you just like need someone to open your eyes a little bit more, then that's where like a coaching session would come in. Or you know your number and you're like, what do I do with that? I need to break through some like unhealthy habits I might be doing that are holding me back. Or I'm just really on a journey for self-discovery, be my best person, work through relationships. Then a coach session would come into that.
Gotcha.
You also recommended a podcast.
There are a lot of podcasts that I love, but I got really obsessed with the Panels podcast.
Yes.
Okay, hold on. I think this is the one I listened to. Continue. Because I'm gonna tell you if it's the
Okay. I think it's Joel Hubbard.
Yeah. Is he a pastor or used to be a pastor or something?
I think so.
I don't know. No, that's
Yeah.
not. Is this it? Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the one I listened to. Yeah. And they always have like a panel of.
I like the panels.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
I think when you hear people talk about themselves that are truly identified as that number, you can just even hear the energy shift, you know? Like
for sure. 100%.
number.
That's
So
how I think I correctly identified. I am almost positive I'm an 8.
Yeah.
But I listened to several panels and the energy of the 8s is all kind of very strong and like dominant, but still emotional in a way too.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, these are my
Well,
people.
I think you're either like, they're speaking my language, everything they're saying. I thought everybody felt that way.
Yeah.
Or literally, what are they talking about?
No, like
some
I think it was
numbers
like
are
the 2s or 4s or something. I was like, these people need to get it together. Like I was like so like
Amber's a 2.
My assistant's a 2. And so it's helped me deal with her because she is like the helper, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And no, I'm just like all the feelings and emotions and like
feelings.
That's what we were talking about today, about how many feelings like Amber has like versus me.
Yeah.
And it's so Amber's view on, well, I guess you can speak for yourself obviously, but like your view on everything is like, well, how does that make me feel?
Yeah. Or like relationships.
Yes.
A lot. 2s are very like relationship focused.
I think it's good too to be in close proximity or to build relationships with people that obviously I think it would be hard to be close with people that were your Enneagram number.
Not always at all.
But
depending on the number.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. If you an 8, it's hard. Okay. It's hard for anybody to be around me. Okay. I can be around anyone. That's the problem.
Oh my gosh. That's funny.
But like I'm an 8 and my husband is like a perfectionist. So he's a 1, which I feel like are both very strong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But my kids are both more feeling and thinking like numbers. I'm sure I've had them like really sit down and I don't know, I could be totally off, but I think it does open up your mind in the way that other people view the world. Like you said, like being in close proximity or in close relationships with people of different.
Well, yeah, and you have to be.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just life.
Yeah.
So.
But to like force yourself to really get to know people and be like, and I think even my assistant, like I said, she's a 2 and it's like, she's functions different.
Well, my husband's an 8.
Yeah.
But that's a very compatible because
good.
of the line.
Okay.
You know, so
well,
that's
okay. I'm glad you said like the line. Can you talk about like wings and all that? Because I think people think with the Enneagram, like once you figure out your number, you just pick your wing, and that's not what.
So get a book, read a book. Is it okay to take a couple tests online?
I mean, I don't advocate it.
Okay, so get a book or listen to a book on audio and really figure out like what number you identify with first.
There are podcasts for identifying your numbers.
Okay.
Yes. A lot of the big Enneagram greats really frown on testing at all.
Okay.
But I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a couple tests and just using it as like a
reference.
starter.
Right.
Yeah. Just don't put too much stock in it.
Yes, I do think you're correct. First, I identified as a 7. And then when I started listening to that podcast, I was like, oh no, she's an 8. So I think that, podcasts or like maybe some sort of like written.
Yeah, if you're not a reader,
right?
If you prefer the audio, I mean, there's literally books on the podcasts are on
Right.
audio or whatever. But
so identify yourself first, and then where do you go from there once you realize you have a wing? And what does that mean?
Well, so like,
so
and
the
talk
wing
about like
is,
when you're in health and like,
yeah,
I think that's an important
okay. There's like
aspect.
5 other parts or more of the Enneagram. There are your wings, which is like you lean to one side or the other of your number, and
But those are the numbers that
are directly next to you.
So if I'm an 8, I would lean more towards a 7 or a 9.
Yes, but also the old school and like more widely accepted belief is that wings are like a lot less important than people are trying to make them into now.
Okay.
Like you don't have one wing and that's who you are as like a subtype. So they say that you actually have one wing during the first part of your life and like the other during the second. And that's how you sort of become more well-rounded. So you can access each wing at different times too. Like you might be really living in one side for a while and really living in the other. You probably can relate to both sides.
Yeah.
Because you're closely related to both of those things. And if you go through like the source of each of the types, they kind of start flowing into each other a little bit. So that's how wings work. You're probably going to be like, identify with a little bit of both sides and maybe more at different times as you need them. The lines, I think, are significantly more important.
Yeah.
So the line is like where you're going in stress or health.
Can you, just to explain to everybody else, can you explain what sharing a line means?
So the Enneagram's in a circle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Essentially.
And it's made up of like arrows that go to each number. So that's where the symbol matters.
Gotcha.
Just so you can see what line connects on that symbol, your number to 2 other numbers.
Okay.
So one of the lines goes to where you integrate to. So like, for example, I'm a 2, I integrate to 4. That's where my growth number is. Like as I take on those characteristics, as I'm growing in my number or as I'm in a healthy place, I start to see some of those characteristics.
And as an 8, I know I grow into a 2.
Yeah. So a lot of times they're your like opposite.
Gotcha.
My stress is 8.
Okay.
So I go to 8 in stress. So like once I hit a wall and my health has deteriorated as a 2, then I'm just going to get aggressive. You know what I mean?
So you almost take on when you're in health, you take on the positive things of a 4.
Yes.
And then when you're like not, you take on the negative aspects of an 8.
Generally, yeah.
Okay. So it would be good to know your lines. Like in stress, I take on a 5, I believe.
Yes.
So it would be good
you get really isolated.
Right. It would be good for me to know those type of things, or for any number to know their stress line.
I think it's one of the most important things to know.
Yes. Or their health line.
See, that's not me.
Right.
That
is a part of you. Yeah, but that's an unhealthy.
That's not my general. It means I've gone to an unhealthy place.
Right.
I've let it get too far.
Right.
Once I'm doing those behaviors. Yeah.
I think that's when you know you are correctly identified too, because like once I saw my lines and I was like, oh yeah, like I get, I'll get like massive depression almost, which is that isolation, and which is the opposite of an 8 kind of, because like
it is
are
opposite.
very,
so your stress line is usually your opposite.
Yeah.
You know, like mine goes to 8. So,
but it's a good way to know yourself too.
Yeah. And it is part of yourself. But if you don't identify with the lines, then you need to rethink your number because that's a huge indicator of where you go. You know, you may even be misidentifying yourself as your stress number or your growth number. You know, that's a really common thing because you're thinking, I had originally misidentified my type as a 4 for years because that's my growth number. So I thought, oh, I'm going to 2 in stress.
You're like, I'm just so healthy.
So the best parts of me.
Yeah.
As a CA,
so
you know?
Yeah.
And so, and I thought, oh, I'm behaving like a 2 only because I'm really stressed, you know?
Right.
So what about Haley as a 3 and health?
6.
Okay. Which are we able to generally describe a little bit about each number? Okay. Or like what their,
yeah, maybe we could go through each number and kind of identify what
some basic traits.
Yeah.
There's one more aspect too.
Sorry, go ahead.
Which is
let's
we just get so excited.
Talk.
Yeah.
No. But there's one more thing besides wings and lines, which is there's several more things, but there's instinct variance.
What's that?
I don't know.
Is that a totally different number too?
No, there's 3 different variants, like sexual or 1-to-1, social, and then self-preservation. So every number has those 3 types too. So, or those 3 like instinct variance. So
Oh, yeah.
a social 8 would look different than a self-pres 8.
Yes. And you can be more one.
You always are more one.
Okay.
There's one way that you generally
So like I'm not a sexual 8.
I don't understand.
Okay. Yeah, I do know that.
I don't understand what this part means.
So they're just like ways that you kind of like your instinct and how you operate. So it's just another aspect of it.
There's three categories under this, correct?
Yeah. So social, which is like a very general, you're concerned with like community and
so as an 8,
pretty,
I socialize or act socially a lot as an 8.
Well, it doesn't really mean that. It's more like it really impacts the type of number you are. So like 1-to-1 is somebody who, or sexual, they kind of call it both, is somebody who's very in tune with like chemistry and like relationships or like people or what they're feeling or what's going on between them. They're very relational. Okay. So like a sexual 8 might be a lot more like jealous or they would be more into that sort of like
those traits
instinct
within an 8. Yes.
Okay. Social and then self-pres. Self-pres is going to be more concerned with like protecting themselves, their environment. They might be more introverted. They might be more of a homebody, things like that.
Gotcha.
And
but they would still be like an 8
more
or
partyish. Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
So not always more partyish, but you know, the more community minded and people and friends, like those things. So you're going to lean toward one of those, which will impact. So that's why like 2-3s may look so different.
Okay.
Not just your wing or your level of health, but what your instinct variant is going to change sort of what type of 3 you are.
So there's like those 3 subcategories within every Enneagram number, which completely makes sense.
Yes.
Because I've seen ones act so different. But when I was helping my husband, we were trying to figure out what his Enneagram was. He was real cuspy between a 1 and an 8, and we're both very dominant, but he's a 1, but I think he has like certain traits within the 1 that kind of
make him behave differently. Yeah, for sure. And everyone does.
Yes.
Okay. And then you said something about levels of health. So every number can be the healthiest version or the least healthy version of themselves. They say there's like 10 levels ish, but they're loose, you know? So that's going to impact what you look like too. Yeah. A healthy 8 is going to look entirely different than an unhealthy 8. And you sort of move up and down your levels of health. So your goal is to be the best version of you, not to be more like another number or different than
most hardcore 8 ever. Yeah. Or whatever that
it's definitely to like be, like the best version of your type.
Right.
That's your goal.
So would that be excluding your stress number as much as possible? Like
not necessarily, because also now they're speaking to like taking on the positive characteristics of your stress number as a growth process
because it's a line.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. And you know, the other way around too. So
I think this is so important, especially for stylists too. And this is why Amber is such a great guest for us to have. I think it's so important to understand how you function with other people and what role you play in relationships before you enter relationships. And I think that's where kind of hair school does us a disservice, where they're like, okay, great. You want to do hair. And they throw you out to the world and you don't have the tools to create boundaries or to,
that's a good point.
You know, even to have self-awareness to know how you function with other types of people. So this is just fascinating to me because I just love self-awareness in general, but I think the more self-aware you can be, the more, just the better habits you can create for yourself, the more discipline you can create for yourself in healthy ways.
Well, and our job is a service.
Yes.
A career. Yes. So you're creating relationships all day, every day with your coworkers, but with your clients.
Right.
So knowing how to communicate with them better is just going to make you more successful. So.
And what's crazy is at the end of the day, it's like our only job title is to do hair.
Yeah.
So I think we get lost sometimes when we come out of hair school and we're like, Haley's really great about, she just has boundaries. And I think when we get out of hair school, it's like we think we have to create these great relationships with every single client and have to tell them every single detail and want to know every single detail about,
Amber's like going
you're
like
singing
this.
my song.
Yeah,
no,
Amber's
and
like,
I think we do. And I think the Enneagram or other self-growth tools are good tools to help you understand that may actually be detrimental to your career.
I think I've built my whole career on that.
Right.
Rather than hair.
Doing
you know
hair.
what I mean?
Yeah. And I think there's two types of hairstylists who remember that what they're doing is hair. And then there's you and I who are like, 8, 9, 10 years into their career, they're burnt out. They feel like crap. And they forget that they're even doing hair because they're sucked dry, So it's like, I think this could be a useful tool, honestly, at the very beginning of a career with hair. But I think it's obviously never too late to know yourself really well. And then to maybe reestablish boundaries based on the best way that you perform.
I think
that's true.
But it's harder for some types of people. And I think your number can really, it's hard for some people to establish boundaries. And it's not that you don't want to, it's just a part of who you are. Like Amber, we were talking about at Starbucks this morning, they didn't get her food. And she was like, okay, what do I say? Who do I tell that I need my food? And I was like, do you want me to say it?
And me and Haley are like, you just tell them I don't have my food.
Right. But she's like, I don't want to possibly ruin a part of their day. I'm like, yeah, but their job is to get your food.
Right. Well, she hated me though.
She didn't. Amber, she handed Amber her food. She's like, she hated me. She hated me. So it's just so different how different people perceive interactions, even something as small as that, their interaction with the Starbucks person. Amber's so concerned that girl hated her. And I was like, no,
Haley's we'll never see her again, number one. And number two, she works at Starbucks.
I live in that area.
You're like, hide your face, Amber. I'll get your food.
But I didn't do anything wrong. We asked for my food. So of course she doesn't hate me. That's ridiculous. And to think that girl cared at all about me enough to actually cared about that is so silly because she's a person doing her own thing that day.
Right.
But it was hard for me to say something because my natural instinct is, I don't want to bother her. Right. Not like me. I'd rather just leave without my food. But that's really hard in this sort of a career,
especially when it comes to ideas like raising your prices or changing your schedule or, anything.
You're addressing everything we were talking about in the car.
It's because I have a line to two.
Yeah.
It's because I'm because I struggle with those things too. And I kind of do have to get in a healthy place for me to be like, no, this is okay. And this is actually the way things have to work.
Well, and also boundaries so far beyond that. Most of my relationships with my clients are extremely personal,
right?
And I don't know if that's really always the best way,
I think it can and cannot be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think there's a way to still have a personal relationship without it weighing you down.
Yes, but taking it home and texting them for, every life event that comes their way. You're their person when they're not in your chair. That's crossing boundaries.
Because then when it goes to talk hair, you're like,
most of the
everything's
time
too
they're
personal.
Oh yeah, I do my hair. That's
which
not even why they're there.
So how you were saying different things matter to different people. You think about relationships and feelings and I cannot relate to what you're saying about taking people's problems home. So it's almost like you're speaking a foreign language when you're referring to that kind of stuff in the hair world. I'm like, well, it's work. But you're
also it's their problems.
But Amber cares so deeply about everybody's feelings and no offense, everybody, I don't at all.
And I also think an issue is I want to be the fixer of their feelings because then they're so indebted to me, they'll never leave me. You know what I mean? And
that's so healthy to know that though.
Yeah. It sounds terrible, but I've already come to terms with that.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
And that's not,
I am also
unrealistic, first of all.
Wildly enthusiastic about not being responsible for other people's feelings. It is so incredibly exciting to me that I do not have to be responsible for other people's feelings.
That is so liberating to think oh, that's not my job actually.
But you've learned that over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not an instinct, so I have to fight it,
right.
But that's hard in this field. I literally had a therapist tell me a few years ago, I think your job is really bad for you. I don't know if this should be your
You're like,
career.
well, listen, bitch, this is my job.
I'm in it. But she was like, I don't know if you can come out of this because all day you have to win people's approval and maintain them coming back to you. And it's just feeding this unhealthy pattern that you have,
Wow.
Because it's kind of your job, make them happy so that they want to keep coming to me. And
I feel like
That's
I sit in between you and Haley
fascinating.
because Haley is so disconnected in that way from that feeling. Like you're not like trying to be anybody's best friend. And then I sit somewhere in the middle where like I do want to make people happy, but I also realize I'm doing a job.
Well, I want to make people happy. I want to make people feel great
like,
and beautiful. But like if somebody decides to like go elsewhere, if they'd let me know, like, that's great, I'm not going to think twice of it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because like to me, like that's their choice. Like
it's not rejection.
I don't feel rejected by that.
Ooh, that's a good point.
At all. So I don't know.
Yeah. Whereas like we just had a,
I just don't take it personally at all. And I think
but everything's personal to me.
Right.
I mean, that's what life is, you know?
Yeah. And I can separate that, I think. Or maybe I just don't have.
Haley's like, maybe I literally don't have the
I'm
feeling.
A robot.
No, it's just, that's
I think you're
practical.
perfect.
That is a practical approach because of course it's not rejection,
right?
You know?
Right.
And I mean, I've come to learn those things in my old
Talk
wise
close
age.
to the mic so we can hear you.
But,
Sorry.
But it's been a long road to learn that isn't rejection. It's a practical choice. I mean, what if somebody, you know, needed just something different? It doesn't have to be personal.
Because everyone's always looking out for themselves. I think that's the one thing that's helped me in my career too, is to realize that like in the same way that I'm not selfish, but like
you're
want to
always
do what's best for
best
me.
For you.
Yeah. Everyone else is too. And that doesn't mean that I'm doing anybody dirty on purpose ever.
Right.
Like I'm just like, yo, this is what's best for me. But I think that too. And there's other numbers too that I think
definitely
take things more personal.
Can we do that? Can we go do like a brief overview of the numbers?
Start at the 1.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Just tell us like what you think like is important to know about each number.
Okay.
Or what would be an identifying maybe?
Yes. Okay. So a 1 is going to, the most important identifier, we talked about this for the 1 that is no other number has, and if you don't have it, you can't be a 1.
Okay.
Is that you have a constant inner critic.
Okay.
So a 1 is, they have a lot of terms like the reformer or the perfectionist or different things like that, idealist, whatever, but it's a constant inner critic that is just kind of berating you or telling you like you could have done that better or that wasn't right, that wasn't good enough.
Could that play out into your expectations for other people too? Like
it absolutely does.
As a boss, okay, here's throwing my husband out there, but like as a leader of like a 2-person team, I feel like his expectations for his partner is always like so astronomical and high, but those are his expectations for himself too.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's,
and I think a 1, one differentiating between a 1 and a 9, because they can be often mistaken, is a 1 cares what other people think. They want the truth exposed and they want another person to know and understand the truth as well.
Yes.
And hold to that you know, standard. So
they have a touch of justice to them, kind of.
Very much, yeah. And just like a search for like integrity and truth, but it really stems from this inner critic that is really making them fall short. Like we all have negative self-talk a time or two, but it's like such an integrative part of how a 1 thinks and processes. They hear this voice constantly. So obviously that lends to wonderful things too. I don't want to
it can
only
push
focus
them
on bad, qualities, but sometimes it's easier to identify your
bad
hardship. You know what I mean?
And I think
your good things.
I think once too, like I see in my husband, the good things about that are like he has a great credit score. You know what I mean? There's good things that like really seriously. Like there's good things where he holds himself to such a high standard that I'm like, that's insane, bro. But like, good job, you know?
Sure. Organization.
Yes.
They're wonderfully organized.
Yes.
You know?
So, oh my
just a lot of integrity too.
Yes. Like everything's on time. Like everything's very, so yeah. I definitely think that could be a good trait. What about 2s?
And also like a childhood like issue for 1 is they came through this, a lot of times it came from like not feeling there was like enough structure or rules or whatever. So they sort of created those boundaries and rules for themselves and believe in them. So just briefly, 2 is like a lot of women misidentify as 2s because especially they say like during that like baby boomer generation where that was like expected of women. It's a very typically maternal, nurturing, the like feminine ideal. So it's very like, imagine like the overbearing mother type,
Gotcha.
like very eager to help, eager to please. It all stems from this focus on like relationships, love, and really the desire to be wanted.
Okay.
Desire to be wanted or loved. So they're others focused and others minded, but with the intent of receiving that love back.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
most of it is like a give to get sort of scenario. And you may, like I didn't realize that you were doing those things because you want that in return. But if you really start paying attention to your motives a lot, like 2s tend to get like resentful because it's like, well, I'm doing all this stuff. Like you don't notice, but you're expecting that return of really just like appreciation and love, you know what I mean? But
Right.
Which could turn, I feel like, into like a little bit passive aggressive too, because
2s
it's
could
like
be aggressive or passive aggressive.
Yeah,
Sometimes
okay,
it can
okay.
be passive aggressive, but they quickly get aggressive. Like
Okay.
a 2 will tell you like it is. It's not a 9. A
Okay.
9 is going to be very others minded, but 2s know what they want.
Okay.
They have their agenda and they can go quickly to 8 and be aggressive, but a very like not say anything until like totally bubble over
Gotcha.
kind of a situation.
Gotcha.
And that resentment is like, that tone is there, I would think a lot. But so I think it's easy for women to misidentify, especially as mothers. We get in that role all the time anyway,
Right.
where you're nurturing but so yeah, they just basically took on a caretaking or nurturing role early on. 3 is like the achiever performer. 3 is like the golden child. They're typically extroverted. They're very productive, very task-oriented. It's interesting because we didn't talk about triads, but 2 and 3 are both in the feeling triad, which means they struggle with this like shame factor. But 3, you probably wouldn't know that with a 3 because they're so disconnected from their own feelings.
they're the David Copperfields of the world.
Yeah,
They're
they're
the-
shapeshifters.
They're the
like-
mysterious person you want to be around.
I don't know.
I always say Haley
Okay.
has an air of mystery around her.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Where like,
Okay.
you know, like she's got a lot of cool stuff going on, but you don't exactly know, you know?
Okay. Well, and that may
So
be
she's
a
the
little bit of
achiever
a
and-
wing. That
yeah.
might be a little of a wing to a 4. That's a typical 4 characteristic. But you know, it's like 3s are like everything they touch just turns into magic, which is totally you. But they're just really good at getting things done. And they're doing it really for this like sense of achievement that makes them feel valuable because they really struggle with their worth like early on. Or maybe their family like really had high expectations, or they just early on plugged into what people saw as like successful and worthy and valuable or achievement. And they're oriented to the future. So they're always planning and doing the next thing.
That's another thing I learned too, is the different numbers are, some are more present oriented, some are more
Right.
past oriented, and then some are more future. Like I know a
Yeah.
1 is a past.
1 is a present.
Present. Okay.
Yeah.
And then threes are future.
3 is a future.
What are 2?
2 is present.
2 is present. Okay.
Mhm.
What about 4s?
4s are super interesting. They're like the other really feeling oriented. They're in the feeling triad with those 3. It's the most shame. The 4 is the one that can like sit in melancholy. A lot of times I think this one's mistyped because it's known as like the artist, musician, creative, but just because you're creative or artistic doesn't mean you're a 4, you know?
Right.
Or are all 4s artists, but it tends toward that. They like the drama. They like to be different or unique. They're not going with mainstream.
So like very self-identifying, kind of like
I could
unique.
see why
Yeah.
you thought you were a
Yes.
4 for a long time.
Definitely. And that shares a line with 2.
Yeah.
So like that is like a growth process for me to like go. So 4s are very absorbed in their own feelings.
Okay.
Their own feeling world is like hard for them to even get out of. So like they can't do something until they've processed that feeling, you know? And 4s' deep desires to be understood.
Okay.
They're looking for someone to kind of meet them emotionally, you know? And they can like deal with like the hard stuff and deep stuff. They want to connect like deeply with a person. And they, 4 grows actually by going to 1. So like there's often like a line of, and then disintegrates to 2. So it can look a little bit either way, like getting it together, you know, and being perfectionistic and like really organized. But I think 4 is one of the most, I think it's known as like the most rare. And I think a lot of people are out there thinking they're 4s because they just read through and they're like, I'm artsy, I'm this, I'm creative, I'm empathetic, you know. But
there's a lot of layers to 4, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very complex, you know, it's just a really, really emotionally intense. Unfortunately, that's the other thing too, is I think a lot of people who struggle with depression and mental health issues think that means they're 4.
Right.
4 depression isn't like anyone who has depression. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that was an issue for me. It was like, oh, well, I'm artsy and I get depressed, so I'm a 4.
Right.
But that's
me too, girl, but we ain't 4s.
Yeah, that's such a basic understanding. I'm like into feelings, I'm a 4, but that is like a very like a melancholy is what they call it for 4s. Like they're able to sit in the melancholy and like that doesn't bum them out.
Right.
They're just like, well, that's just
whereas
part of
we're
the beauty
like, wow,
of life,
this is sad.
you know?
Yeah.
Like I am okay with the beauty of life. So 4 and then 5 is hard for me. 5 is like,
I don't know
the
much
hardest
about
one for me.
5s.
So 5s are like, they grew up with the wrongful idea that their needs are a problem. So they dealt with that by hoarding information. So they're like,
ooh, this is where my know-it-all comes out when I go to a bad place. Okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
They hoard information and they want to like know and understand. And they're very good, like researchers.
Okay.
Sometimes they're called the observer, but it's because they're going to take in as much information as they can. The important thing to identify a 5 is a 5 wakes up every day with like a limited amount of energy and they hoard that energy. So like going out and being around people is very draining. And then they need to like retreat to build that up.
So they're introverted. Their battery
most introverted.
Their battery gets charged by being alone.
And yeah, absolutely. And their own thoughts. So 5s are going to be very, typically very intellectual. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They just are because they're.
And this is where I go to a bad place. This is like 100% on. And like my stress line, I get very like that's how I kind of defend myself is with knowledge.
Yeah.
And like,
yes.
I become
and
like just
withdrawn.
Yeah.
They tend to withdraw a lot. And like my husband's like I just can tell he's in a bad place if like he's just sitting in the basement or like he's, you know, like obsessively looking up like baseball stats or whatever, because for some reason that's like weirdly like comforting to him. Like he knows and he's like charting baseball weird stuff. I don't even understand, but you know, that's unusual, but I can tell that's like how he's coping with stress. Like, okay, once I know all of this, then like I will feel more in control again.
I'll be whole, yeah.
Yeah. But they tend to be, you know, like the researchers,
right?
The intellectuals, a lot of professors, teachers,
those weirdo engineers. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I mean, it's not always those careers, but you can see how it'd be difficult for a 5 to be a hairdresser.
Yeah. They value knowledge.
Extremely depleted by the energy it takes to be around other people. That is so depleting.
And on my bad days, that's how it's hard for me. Like, or bad weeks when I'm like.
Yeah. It would be very unlikely for someone of that number to choose this career because it would not nourish them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Feel good. Yeah.
Right.
What about
6? 6 is like so fun and interesting because
I think
they have
my
two
little
sides.
Shmoo. My little daughter's a 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're driven by anxiety. Part of the thinking triad. We entered the thinking triad with 5. I feel like I'm so unorganized the way I'm explaining all this.
No, you're fine.
The 6 is going to be motivated by anxiety, but they have like these two sides, which are phobic and counterphobic. Both can exist within the same individual, different times. It's how they face their fears or anxiety. All 3 of these thinking triad numbers are fear-based, so it's how they're coping with their fear, whereas like the feeling one was with shame. 6 is either cope with it by facing it head on. Typically, they're pre-planning. They're constantly going through their head, like what the next worst-case scenario could be. How can I be prepared for it? What do I need to think through ahead of time to like cope with that and like diligently doing everything for that. Sometimes they're mistyped as 2s a lot, like especially the women, because they're very like relational, but their focus isn't on the feeling aspect of that relationship, you know?
Oh, okay.
It's the person when you show up at like the Six Flags or Kings Island that like, you're like, does anybody? And they like have the sunscreen right there.
Yes.
And they're like,
which could be true of a 2 as well. That's another reason that can get mistyped, because a 2 is thinking,
but they're not doing it because they
want
like
everything
you.
for everybody.
Yeah.
I want buddy to have what they need, and I'm going to be there for them. Whereas a 6 is like, we got to be prepared.
Yeah, no, they're like,
You
this
know?
makes sense. Duh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a practical.
They're who you want to be with if you're like
prepared.
in the middle of the woods camping and like,
Yeah. Katie literally was like still working on her Enneagram number. And she was doing my hair, and she was like, I just asked for Christmas every year. I asked for like a big, huge, really sturdy like backpack full of all like the essentials in case like the apocalypse comes.
and you're like, oh, you're a 6.
I was like, what? She's like, well, yeah, wouldn't that be like an amazing gift to like know you had everything that you could need? Like,
That's my daughter.
Flares and knives and all this stuff. I was like, that's the worst gift. She's like, I think that would be amazing. I was like, we need to like touch on a 6. I'm wondering if that could be your number, which it totally is. And once we started working through that,
is so
I
funny.
had never thought that she was someone like that, but it makes sense. And that was like a super red flag that might be the case.
Yeah.
They're warriors.
Is there like a withdrawn part of them too?
So 6s have like these 2 opposing sides. So they're very known as being like extremists in both ways. 6s can almost be like aggressive or like really, really not aggressive. You know, they can be lots of different things. I think 6 is supposed to be the most common number. Most people are 6s.
Really?
Yeah.
And they came from like a feeling somehow in their childhood where they felt, okay, you're not safe. You're not safe, so you need to like be prepared to be safe. You know?
I've failed as a mother. I'm just kidding.
We all have. That's the other thing about the Enneagram is like you're reading it, no matter what number your kid is, you're like, oh, I messed that up. But like that's because that's life, you know? We're not perfect.
No
we
one
all
knows how to do it.
kind of failed as a mother because we brought our own baggage,
Right,
you know?
right.
So I'm like overbearing, and now my son's a 9 because he thinks he doesn't have a voice because like I do everything for him. So then
And I'm like underbearing. And so my daughter needs like a flare, you know? She's like, I might
like,
get
"The
lost
world's
and
crazy,
mom
send
might not
help."
care. Yeah. So give me a rocket to set off.
my daughter needs a flare. Well,
She'll be a great adult though.
she'll be so responsible,
She
and
already
they're very
is.
kind. They're very friendly. Actually, they're really funny. So 6s, most comedians are known as like it's a common for comedians to be 6s. 6s are known as being very
fun.
funny.
Okay.
Because they're neurotic, you know? And like
Yeah.
if they can poke fun at that, which they usually can, it can be really funny. So
What about 7s? 7s was what I misidentified myself as because my senior superlative and high school was life of the party. And I had like a big class.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I'm just so fun.
well, 7s and 8s have a lot in common. They really do. And they're right next to each
But
other.
I'm
for a
also an
reason.
asshole. And that's why I knew I was
And
an 8.
7s can be too.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing too, is like we all can.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me just
So
say.
what's a main
Right.
7?
7s are, they're very like motivated by possibilities.
Okay.
And new ideas. And they do not like to be bored. They get bored easily. They need change. They need adventure. They are social. They're looking for fun. They like to be happy and maintain happiness for other people. They're always, so 7s are in the same triad, but their anxiety is going to be a lot more hidden because they're going to be so optimistic, and they avoid their anxiety by keeping busy.
Yep.
Moving on to the next thing, keeping it light, ready to go on. But it doesn't mean like, I think the worst thing for 7s is that they get misunderstood as never being serious or intelligent, because they are. They actually have really quick minds, quick wits. They're very funny and sharp and intelligent.
What's
but
their stress line?
7 goes to 1.
Okay.
So a lot of 7s have that issue where they get that like perfectionistic, judgmental. And then their growth line then is to 5.
Okay.
So that's another thing that I think is confusing with the 7-8 if you're having a hard time, because they both go to 5 in different ways.
Right.
So 7 grows by going to 5 and just kind of taking alone time, which is like the worst thing too of 7 is taking alone time.
Right.
Like if
But
you're like,
the
you
best
should
thing for
meditate.
them.
They're
Yes.
like, never.
Yeah. This is my best friend.
Would
No.
never meditate.
This is my best friend
It's
too.
mine
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah. So,
What is their childhood?
so 7 usually had like a, issue where they were concerned about nurturance.
Okay.
And in feeling that they weren't going to get that nurturance,
Okay.
they looked for like providing their own.
Gotcha. Self-soothing kind of.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And so in all the best ways. So they say like a big difference between 7 and 8 is like 7 is looking at life like a buffet. I want to try everything. I want a little bit of everything. Like I want this and I want this and I'm ready for this and this. An 8 can look similar because they are also indulgent, but an 8 is like, this wine's good. I want the whole bottle in 5 bottles.
I'm like already thinking about what 2 donuts I'm going to have next. Yeah.
And both of those can be that way a little bit. Yeah. They are kind of like indulgent in that way. So it's hard to look. And 7s really, a lot of them are activists. They want to make the world a better place. So anything else? What else can I say about that? I do feel like they can struggle to get their like serious side seen a little bit. Just because it's their instinct to kind of be like, okay, well, I need to lighten this mood or make this happy and fun. Like everybody's counting on me because I'm the fun person, you know? Right. But yeah, I mean, who doesn't want that around? You know, it's just a fun.
Yeah, no. What about an 8?
8 is, 8s are usually pretty easy to identify. You know, they really are. There's a few numbers that some are like, this person could study for years and it's hard to tell. 8s are one of those that it's usually pretty easy to see. They're like the most assertive. They're the most direct. They are as the opposite of the 2 in the sense that they're the typical masculine energy. You know, everything that you think of with like the masculine energy or like patriarchal role, the protector. You know?
And my husband said that about me, about how he struggled to be like the leader. Yeah. Like I'll be like, I need you to lead in this way. And like over the years, I use the word alpha because that's just what identifies with me. And so I'll say, I need you to be alpha in this way. And he's like, well, it's so hard sometimes because you're so alpha.
Yes.
You know? So yeah, I think that is and it can play out in like a nurturing way. I think like
100%. So 8 has
not
that
I'm
underlying
being like sorry.
8's inside. They're like that person that's like rough on the outside and like super marshmallow on the inside.
My mom always called me a porcupine growing up. She'd be like, I like want to pet you and touch you so bad, but then like I'd go to pet you and like I'd get poked, like ouch. Aww. And I'm like, oh, sorry, I'm psycho.
But the internal heart of an 8 is like the most tender. And I think that's sort of the issue is like they were this tender person who sometime in their childhood saw like, that's not safe to be vulnerable. So they put up all of this like hard walls and it's in there, but it's only coming out if they trust you, like implicitly. You know?
What I will do as a defense mechanism as an 8 is I will put my vulnerable stuff out there first.
Okay.
So that, but like on display, but like only what I choose.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that everybody can see it real quickly.
Cards on the table with an 8. And I think that's why I love it. Like my husband's an 8 and I love it. I know that most people would be offended by him, but I feel safe with him because I don't ever have to guess what he's thinking.
Right.
It might hurt sometimes. It might not be my favorite way to phrase it, but
I called it
tact.
I called it raw dogging.
That's what I always tell him. Like, it's just that you could tweak like 5 of those words and it wouldn't be as abrasive. But you know what? I always walk away like, I know how he feels. I don't have to guess. It doesn't make me feel insecure. And I'm comfortable with that sort of communication. Also, 8s see that type of communicating as like as a connection.
Effective and
they connect through that energy of like arguing or, being really like blunt and abrasive. Even a fight is like okay with them. They're just getting that charge because 8s are very like dynamic. They have a lot of energy. And so they're looking to be met with that energy. And they respect people who stand up for themselves. So they'll test, like, are you going to back down?
Yeah. I like alpha energy. Yeah,
absolutely. And 8 wants that right back at them. So,
which is
have
why
a
I
power
think,
struggle in our house. Too,
yes.
For sure. I mean, he's always like, well, you're the boss. And I'm like, are you insane? You know what I mean?
You're like, don't patronize me.
But I mean, like, I think he thinks that, you know what I mean? Because, well, like we have that line. So we kind of bounce back and forth a lot between, okay, who's going to be, the boss here and who's going to be, the nurturing here. And like with the kids, I mean, 8s are just very, we've talked about this. They love the underdog. So like children, animals, 8s love them.
Yeah.
They love them. That's where they get their like softness out, because anything they perceive as weaker, they're going to want to like support, you know?
Oh, my husband thought I was nuts. I was a Girl Scout leader for 4 years, like voluntarily, like, no, I'm not getting paid, but like it made me so happy to be able to like lead a group and be responsible for that of like young girls.
Empowerment.
And like, I didn't even know why. I mean, I was a Girl Scout way too long, like forever. But like when I did that, I was like, why am I doing this? But like, it just felt so right to me. And that makes sense because like,
they love that empowerment of anything weaker, which that's because that's where their issue is with strength.
Right.
So they're protecting their vulnerability because they each feel that they have to be seen as strong. So, because of whatever in their childhood, they needed a protector. They became the protector. So,
didn't you say protect? Like we talked about this for a minute, like a protector over a mom. A lot of times too. Like I did take on
an ambivalence to your maternal.
Yeah.
So you took a protective role in your family for one reason or another.
Yes.
A lot
and
of
mine was
I
over
think
my mom.
Yeah. Or like the other children.
Right.
You know, if there was like an absence of a protective figure, it might be, you know, lots of different reasons. But and then 9, which is like the, you know, peak of the circle. And in a lot of ways, they say that's because they sort of have characteristics of all of them. A 9 is a very selfless type. They're others-minded. They're called the peacemaker because the main reason they're called the peacemaker is because their goal is to avoid conflict or any like fragmentation of relationships, because that connection and that peace is like the most important thing to them. So they are selfless in a true selfless way as opposed to the 2, whereas their mental process literally is linked to others for the most part.
Okay.
They can like have their mind changed. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're also like stubborn. Like if they really are standing firm on something, they're standing firm on it. They're not going to come out with it and like say to you, they're just going to be silent and rock solid, and you're not. They're a quiet will of iron. You know what I mean? And passive aggressiveness can come out with that. But 9s a lot of times felt like they were overlooked or like their voice wasn't heard. Maybe they were like the youngest in a family, or it was just a situation where they weren't really allowed to have like strong opinions or like voice that. And so they just sort of learned to keep the peace, go with the flow, whatever you guys say, that's what I'll do to make this easier and make everybody happy, because I don't want this to cause any conflict, you know?
And correct me if I'm wrong too. Now I'm thinking my daughter's a 9, but it's not anyone else's job to identify anyone else. Right.
It's
so like me thinking
to do that.
Okay. So like me thinking like my daughter's 6. Oh wait, she's a 9. Like actually I should just stop and just like let her maybe read books or discover maybe what she feels.
No, I mean, you could speculate as a parent trying to like parent her as best you could.
Right.
I just wouldn't verbalize that to her. So like as a coach, you never want to tell, you're literally robbing a person by saying like, even if during a session of like identifying their type, I'm never going to be like, well, you're a 4. You know,
because they get those stigmas of those big, like,
well, also because it truly is a journey. And if you didn't come to that realization yourself, you're not really understanding who you are and what your issues are. You're just like, oh, okay, I'm that. And then you're done. But like, if you work through it and you start seeing it in yourself and you're like, I think I'm doing this because of that, you can actually have the growth. No one has growth by someone just saying like, well, that's what number you are. And then you read about it and you're like, oh, I guess I must do that. You know,
it's like how we pay people to go to therapy and pretty much come to our own conclusions about our problems.
You have to, because that's the work.
Right.
The work is coming to that conclusion. Right. So of course you like lead them with questions or, you know,
I think you can identify, especially your own children.
Oh, I can identify lots of people.
Yeah.
At least for what I think,
right.
But it's just not telling them what it is. So you can speculate, think all you want, figure her out, you know, but I would just not push that on her. Just sort of be like with my son, I'm always asking like all these probing questions about it.
Right. You know? You're like, let me slam this down.
And like just really trying, you know, I try not to manipulate it, but just be like, you know, well, do you think you do this or do you think you feel this? And at some point they're just like, oh my gosh, yes, that's so me, you know?
Right.
And then you land on that. And if they don't do that, then you just give them time to kind of care about it, because obviously kids too. Now, I mean, they can change a little bit. Like I think he's coming into that, but do I think he's locked into being a 9? No.
I think birth order plays a huge role in things too.
Yeah, it can.
Isn't it a thing also where because I know in that book you gave me, it says something
Mm-hmm.
about being like 25.
So
All of these things like
around the age of
previous
25.
to your, when you're 25.
As like my son's 12. If we go through some trauma or things change a lot in the next few years, I think he could easily like maybe swing to one of the wings and become that number, or maybe even align potentially, or I haven't identified him fully or whatever. But in the next few years,
I think that's so true.
yeah. I mean, he's still, he's 12.
I didn't take on that nurturing situation with my mom till I was about 15 or 16,
Yes.
honestly. And I think that's when I really took on more of an alpha personality type. So I think 25, honestly, like that makes so much sense.
In your 20s, it's actually harder to figure yourself out as you get older because you've grown. But if you have a hard time thinking about what your type is, they say to think about who you were around the age between 20 and 25.
Okay.
That's when you were kind of your rawest, you were adult enough that you kind of like already formed whatever was going to happen to you, but you were young enough that you hadn't really fixed it or like put it together yet.
Yeah.
Right.
You were just behaving, And so, yeah, that general time frame, like 20 to 25, and that's easy to, like, I learned Enneagram when I was that age, but your kids, it's like you kind of have to think with a grain of salt. And then past that age, like our parents, we're looking at them like, well, I mean, they've hopefully developed into more well-rounded humans. They're not just acting out on that now.
I think that's a good point too, because how you were saying that, like, you hopefully come from kind of one side of your wing and grow into another. Like,
yes.
I think as an 8, becoming more of a peacemaker, becoming more, like I'm doing that now with like the self-growth that I'm going through and kind of like reconciling some of like whatever issues and being able to be like, I don't want all this chaos, or I don't want all this, like hardcore passion towards one thing. Like I want things a little more spread out and even. I can feel myself shifting into that 9 space a little bit more. So that would make
it's going to make you look different,
yes.
and maybe not be as easily identified.
Yes, so much sense. So thank you for sharing your knowledge about this. I wanted to ask you one more thing. So yeah, read books, listen to a podcast if you're trying to identify your number.
I really love Suzanne Stabile.
Okay.
She's one of the co-writers of The Road Back to You.
Okay.
And her podcast is The Enneagram Journey.
Okay.
It's really
okay.
It's a good one.
Give us a couple numbers. I just think this is really interesting. Give us a couple of numbers that are very, very easily like
mistyped.
Yes.
Okay.
In case people like listen to this and then they go get a book or they go listen to a couple podcasts and they're like, man, I just really like don't know. Maybe they could listen back to this and kind of help.
Well, one of the biggest things to do if you're in that situation is to write down the numbers and like check off 5 that you're not.
Okay.
And then you're left with 4.
Okay.
Look at those 4 and sort of see like, do they share a line? Because if they do, you're kind of on the right track in probably that area.
Okay.
And then just start sort of like living in 1 or 2 of them for a few weeks and like observing yourself. But at least get those 5 out of the way. There should be 5 that you absolutely know you're not. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they say 1 and 9 are the most common.
Okay.
Difficult to identify between. And especially
because they get confused the most,
or like people can't decide if they're one or the other.
Okay.
Two. They're
so they're close.
It seems like they wouldn't be, but they really are. So they're both in the anger triad.
Okay,
they're both dealing with repressed anger.
Is it an anger triad too?
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep asking about myself, but I'm like,
8s are easy because they're the way they deal with the anger is to bring it out
outward. Yeah.
1 and 9 are both repressing it. So they're both like, I'm not angry. I shouldn't be angry,
Right.
And then obviously then it comes out. So they can be very detail oriented, very responsible. They can look a lot alike and have a lot of similar motivation. So that's a difficult one to determine. I think a big factor there is like with a 9, if they're arguing a point with someone, which they're going to try not to, they don't care. They don't need the other person to like know that truth. They're just like, well, this is what I'm sticking to and I'm going to keep quiet about it. Okay. Whereas a 1 is going to really need that to like come out so people know the truth. That's a big one.
Yeah. My husband really needs you to know.
Yeah. Because it matters. A 1 is just like, well, they can think what they want. I'm doing what I want and nobody's going to need to know about it because I don't want to make waves, 2 and 4 are common mistypes because they're both relationship oriented. They're both feeling oriented. They look really different. They do. A 2 is going to be a lot more assertive and a lot less aware of their own feelings about things. I think 3 and 8 is a really common mistype.
I thought I was an 8 for a long time.
Yes, that's a very common one. They're both future oriented. They're both really good at getting things done.
Maybe that's why Haley and I work so well together.
Absolutely. Those are also very compatible. I mean, but obviously then there are differences, that's a common one. A 3 is going to, this is a difference. A 3 is
Are they
going
both,
to,
sorry, are 3 and 8s both living in the future?
Yeah.
Okay.
And a 7, that's the other one that lives
Okay.
in the future.
Yeah.
A 3 is going to care how things are presented.
Mm-hmm.
And an 8 isn't.
Mm-hmm.
They just, that's going to be a really big difference.
I feel like that's the opposite of Haley and I. Like when I ask her, I'm like, how do you think this looks? And she's like, I don't care. Just, it's fine. Whatever you think. But
No, I think it depends on what it is.
Yeah.
Because there are things that I care very much about how it's presented. I think things that aren't a big deal to me, I don't care how they're presented, or something that's not like a huge priority to me. I think. I know when I was trying to decide between being an 8 and a 3, the huge thing for me that I could not get behind about the 8 was the need for justice, because in my mind, life isn't fair and you just have to get over it and deal with it. Like nobody owes anybody anything. And then the other thing was 8s almost, they can seek out confrontation, correct?
Definitely.
And confrontation does not bother me in the slightest. I don't bat an eye at it. However, I don't go out of my way to have it.
And I will sometimes, and I have to find myself like checking myself and wondering like, is this from a place of justice seeking? Like in college, I was a human rights major. So like that right there, like,
yeah,
I was literally majoring in college.
They like to poke and see the reaction and see what happens. And they don't mind shocking you. And they,
but I think once you mature a little bit as any number, you kind of start to find like, is this valuable or is this working for me? Right. Or, so as I 8, I'm like, is confrontation in certain ways, like working for me, especially in work relationships or at home with relationships. Right. And then you're like, no.
Yeah, like you're not all Eminem and like you make a living off like shocking people and like everybody's like, that's awesome. So.
And then, and then I move into my 9 peacemaker. Yeah. So I'm like, I'll shut up. But, okay. So 3 and 8.
Okay.
What about like 5, 6? You said 6 was the most common?
Yeah.
Typically?
I think 6 can sometimes be mistaken with 9 or 2 or 1. Okay. So there are a few numbers. They're a shapeshifter kind of. There are a few numbers that like are likely to take longer to identify.
Okay.
3 could be 1 because 3 is so good at being whatever it needs to be in that scenario to get that done,
I think that's something that I do often.
Yes. They're literally a chameleon because it's like, this is what's needed here in this scenario, so I can do that.
I think one of the things that I struggled with being a 3, don't you feel like too, like kind of once you identify your number, you're like kind of mad about your number?
You're probably going to be mad.
Yeah.
I honestly, I'm going to read that one book. I'm not 100% feeling that I am an 8. I'm pretty sure I am. But when I first identified with it, I was like, this fucking sucks. This is the worst number ever.
Well,
and that's probably accurate.
Okay, cool.
So I think the thing that I didn't like about the 3 was the fact that I can be a chameleon because I felt like it's like me not being genuine or who I am.
Right.
I don't think that's the case at all, but that's on the surface, like how I took it. Like, I'm like, oh, so I'm just like really fake and I'll just do whatever I have to like get things done. Like that's annoying. So that was like one of the things I didn't like.
Yeah. It'll hit a nerve. Like
it hit my nerve and it made me mad. So I was like, dude, I'm not a 3. I like kind of refused to be a 3.
I know, you're like, no, I'm a super solid person.
We threw it out there as an option.
8. Yeah. But and I know you said like not to take the tests and I only took 2. But each time I took my first number was 8, 3, and 7 on both the tests.
Yes. Which are all the aggressive, future oriented. I mean, it makes sense. You were on the right track.
Right.
Those are easier to identify numbers.
Mine were 8, 2, and 7.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, that really That's like a pretty
That's like a
easy
hot
read
mess.
right there.
Okay.
No, that makes
That's
sense.
like an 8.
An 8 and a 2 line.
Okay.
7 wing. I mean, that's it.
Okay. So I probably am an 8. You're like, just fucking sit
I
in
still think you should like look into it because that's part of your journey. But so, and a 9 is going to have a really challenging time typically identifying themselves. Probably the most difficult.
Okay.
This has been so interesting.
This has been
And
interesting.
then a 6. So the 6, 3, and 9 share a line.
Okay.
So I think that a 6 also can have a hard time. I mean, they're like super responsible and organized, like a 1. They're really like giving and caring to other people, like a 2, and like always helping. They share a line with the 3, so they can like take on those characteristics.
And they don't kind of want to rock the boat a lot. Like,
oh gosh, see, that's another thing. Like the 6s have these 2 polar opposites. So they've got the phobic and counterphobic. So they could go both ways. They're looking for like security in the world.
Okay.
And here's the big difference with a 6 and a 2. A 6 doesn't trust themselves. They don't trust themselves.
Okay.
They're looking for something to trust. A 2 does trust themselves,
Right.
A 6
What about a 9? Because I'm confusing the 6 and the 9 a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
A 6 is pretty distinct.
Okay.
A 9 is a little more of a, like they're very others minded. They merge with like another person.
Okay.
Like, they want to be, they've always felt sort of like insignificant or looked over. So they just sort of take that and then they can like pick up on other people. So then they just sort of kind of can merge with that, and go along with it. They are, but I mean, 9s are really usually very sensitive and, because they're like in tune with other people, it can just be really hard for them to identify themselves because they haven't put a lot of stock in who am I? What do I think? What am I? They're merging with others so much that most of the time they're just like, well, yeah, I could be like that. Well, yeah, I could be like that because they literally could be,
Right.
That is going to take a lot of soul searching, but I think it can almost be easy to identify because they're like that.
Right.
It's that person who is super easy going.
Right.
They're very chill and easy to get along with.
And they get on my freaking nerves because I'm like, I need you. Like, I can't stand that passiveness. Like, I need direct, like, as an 8.
Yeah,
That's like
8s and 9s do pair up a lot though. Because you can see how like
because the 8s freaking bully the 9s around.
And 9s want that.
Yeah.
They want someone to make the decisions. They don't want to be making the decisions.
I can see
the
that.
last thing they want is to be asked to make
And
the
8s
decisions.
like have every decision
They want to be
ever.
handed that,
Yeah.
So it's it's common for like a more dominant and less dominant to pair up. But
Is it common for dominants to pair up?
yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I just really think everything is like, I've seen it all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like you said, you respect that. Like,
Yeah.
you two are friends for a reason. Like I think it's just, that's the beauty of it. There's no like, these two are best together.
Gotcha.
It's just like, let's figure out
Because everyone
how
is,
to get along.
everyone is so multi-layered too. This has been fascinating.
Yeah, thank you
I feel like I need all the books on the Enneagram
much
Yeah.
for coming on.
now. What is do you still do coaching?
Yeah.
What's the best way to get a hold of you if anyone is interested in coaching?
I would say probably
Through Instagram,
Like
email?
Instagram. Yeah,
I think-
tell people just how they can follow you.
Yeah.
okay.
Like, what's your Instagram name?
Instagram is Amber the Therapist with a Amber period.
Period.
Yeah, the period. Therapist.
So like therapist, but
Right.
therapist.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
love it.
Amber period, the period therapist.
Yeah.
Okay.
So coaching, usually like your first, it depends on if you're still looking for your type or not looking for your type. If
Okay.
you're just
Like
looking
what
for
coaching
growth.
looks like for
Yes.
you. Yeah.
First type, like to identify, or first like type identifying session would be a little bit longer. And then otherwise it's like 30 to 45 minutes.
And if someone's looking, if they're already very familiar with the Enneagram and they're looking to become a coach, how would you?
Okay, there are like a lot of, again, just they'd have to message me. There are some different avenues now.
Okay.
Because it's getting so popular, more and more avenues are coming available that weren't, 5 years ago.
So you'd be okay with people getting a hold of you for information about that?
sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's I think the way I grew the most in it. Once I like did
Talking to
that
other people?
process, once I did
becoming-
the coaching
cool.
process, it's kind of like becoming a yoga teacher.
Right.
You can do it to teach, or you can do it because you want that.
Right.
Right,
And
right,
so
right.
I think it was like that for me.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
This has
for
been
joining
awesome.
us. We'll see you guys next week. Hope you guys have the best week ever.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys. Bye.